That'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jacob. Well, Mayor, council members, thank you for joining us today on July 31st. This is the annual city budget showcase that we are performing for council this year. Obviously, it's a little different than in previous years as it is virtual instead of in person.
Just shut that off.
So we are ready to dive right in. We have several presentations to go through with you today by multiple departments within the city. I will be starting off with an introduction of the budgeting process and some of the highlights of the financial analysis that we did to come into this particular year's budget. Jacob, if you could please go ahead and cue up the first slideshow. Thank you, and you can dive right into slide number 2. So first thing we want to talk about is the financial condition of the city, which as in previous years is actually very good. We always ask ourselves the question, what does sound financial condition actually mean? And it's fiscal sustainability over a long period of time, not necessarily just taking a snapshot on a quarterly basis or an annual basis. We don't look at the budget year to year, but we do consider the impacts of the decisions that we make today on how it may impact us longer term, multiple years down the road. Next. Traditionally, there are 3 types of long-term financial obligations that the city has to take a look at: pension costs, infrastructure replacement, and debt and borrowing. The good news is that from the debt and borrowing perspective, the general fund debt has been retired, and the utility enterprise fund debts will be retired this October, and that will leave the city 100% debt-free going forward. We do still have the issue of pension costs, to include the fire department pension. Even though we are contracting that service out, we are still obligated for payments over the next 9 years in order to pay that down. And we always have infrastructure replacement and maintenance that we have to deal with.
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt. What was the date you'd say we'd be debt-free? October?
That's correct, October of this year.
Great, thank you.
Next. So the city takes what's considered a standard approach from municipal financial perspective to plan for our budgeting and our revenues and expenditures, and that is that we look at them over a 5-year horizon. Sometimes we go out a little bit further based on some specific issues, but that 5 years is pretty much a standard. We try to identify the financial issues in advance of them occurring, and if we see that there is going to be an issue, we start having those conversations both internally and with the community and the elected body regarding revenue solutions or changes in the levels of service based on what we project will be happening in the future. Next. The budget assumptions were shared with City Council back in May of 2020. The financial ones were pretty straightforward. We are looking to hold the millage rate consistent at 39947, which it's been at now for a number of years. No new debt to be incurred, either general obligation or for the utilities, and adjustments of the utility rates in accordance with adopted rate resolutions by the City Council in previous years. And those that have no adjustments by resolution will not be touched at this particular time. Which brings us to the next set of slides related to budgeting in uncertain times. I figured that it would be good to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the impacts to the city on budget preparation. Next. So our budget process typically begins in February of each year, which is only 4 months into the fiscal year. And in our case, the COVID-19 pandemic struck in March, where state and local governments started to do shelter-in-place orders, and we endured business closures starting within that window and going forward for several months. The result is that we are in an unknown level of economic uncertainty, both from an extent and duration perspective. We do know that the state in totality is feeling a financial crunch due to sales taxes and other revenues not being collected. And the city has a disbursement of those funds that we receive along with other municipal and county governments across the state. The question is, how deep will that trough be and how long will it extend for before it returns back to some normalcy? This also meant that earlier versions of our revenue forecasts were basically null and void. And where we had thoughts of actually expanding some of our service levels, we actually had to look at protecting service levels we actually already have in place. Next. As I mentioned, the sales and use taxes from the state is starting to feel a pretty big crunch at that level. If you look at the last bullet, for the month of May alone, the general revenues to the state were down by just about $700 million across all industries. So it is a fairly deep trough. The question is, how quickly will it recover and how long will this be protracted for? Next. One of the things that we did in preparation of the budget this year was to make sure that we could continue the current levels of service that the community already enjoys, and to make sure that we have some fail-safes built into the budget so we could adjust our responses to the economic issues as they occurred. We don't know if 30 or 60 days from now we may have to go into another safer at home order, or whether or not things will actually start loosening up because of the discovery of a vaccine that gets rolled out early on in fiscal year 2021. So in either event, the budget's been structured in a way that administratively and with minor input from council, we can make decisions on the fly and adjust very quickly and rapidly. Next. There are a couple good things with regards to the leadership team that we have in place with this particular crisis. And the first is that almost all of us have experience from 2008 Great Recession. We know what it was like to have a large financial impact that prolonged over a period of time. So everyone can look backwards in time and play off of what we learned from those experiences. The other thing, as we talked about, is that this crisis is not financially caused. This is not something that had a root underlying issue that had global impact, where it would take time to dig out of that hole. It's being caused specifically by a health issue, and the quicker that can get under control, the quicker the economy, not just at a local level, but the state, the federal, and international level can return to some normalcy. The negatives associated with this COVID impact is going to be the duration of the event, and the longer it goes, the worse it will be financially for us. Also, the resulting societal impacts. We do not know which businesses will be negatively affected for the long run. There may be global shifts to brick and mortar stores going away and more online purchasing. There may be issues with hiring personnel into the future. We just don't know what the cultural impacts will be from COVID-19. The final negative with this is with regards to control. Under typical emergencies or even economic downturns, we are still in control of our own destiny. In this particular instance, I think we have found that when you talk about something that occurs at an international and national level, you start having declarations that are made at the state level and even at the county level that we are not in a position to override. And if anything, we have to figure out how to continue to operate within the restrictions that are being placed on us. So hopefully at some point in time, we return to a position where we are in 100% control of our destiny as well. Next. So now let's talk a little bit about budget highlights. As we stipulated earlier, no change in the proposed millage rate. Our general fund revenues are pretty close to where we thought they'd be. They're down 1% from last year. Our millage rate continues to be substantially below the state average. We're almost 20% below average. Our total budget being proposed is just about $165 million, pretty darn close to where it was last year. The general fund makes up just under $24 million of that total budget, which is 1% lower than the current fiscal year. Again, debt will be paid off in October of 2020. Electric rates have continued to be reduced, a total of $28 per 1,000 kilowatt hours over the past decade. And our solid waste and stormwater rates have not been touched in 25 years, all promising signs. With regards to concerns, and you'll see this chart a little bit later in the presentation, the first one is rising pension costs. Several years ago, the state made some adjustments in legislation that made us change our rate of return assumptions, and that ultimately resulted in higher payments or an increase in payment dollars that we need to put into the pension funds. The second is with regards to competitive wages. We are getting ready to negotiate our FOP collective bargaining agreement, which is starting up next month. And we need to make sure that we continue to pay a competitive wage and benefits, and not to just retain the employees, but also to attract new ones coming into the organization. Next. This is pretty much a standard list of other areas of concern that we always keep our eyes out for. The infrastructure surtax for Jacksonville is going to be sunsetting in 2030, and that will leave a hole with regards to revenues in about a 10-year window. And then obviously all the others are related to, the next three are related to changes in legislation, either at the state or federal level that we have to adjust to. And then obviously deferred maintenance on our city assets. We are still in a process of getting a handle on asset management and preventive maintenance and replacement schedules for all of our different departments across the city. Next. Other actions that we have that are in process. We are still in process on reducing the tax increment finance collection for the South End CRA district. That will result in a portion of funds going back to the city of Jacksonville, but also a portion of funds coming back to the city of Jacksonville Beach into the general fund coffers. The other is with regards to prioritizing and maintaining our existing assets. You'll hear a little bit more when we talk with other departments, and including Public Works, about how we're trying to get a better handle on doing things from a strategic perspective and a proactive perspective, rather than waiting until things break. Next. We're going to talk a little bit about the general fund, which is the city's primary operating fund. First is to again show you the comparison of our millage rate to other jurisdictions up and down the coastline of Florida, and a lot that are very comparable to us in terms of size, location, and services offered to their community. You can see that we are pretty competitively positioned against those communities, and again below the statewide average. This next chart is to show our readers, or to show our viewers, a breakdown of where their tax dollars go. This chart shows you that the median home assessed value for Jax Beach is about $236,000, and they can expect to pay about $3,600 a year in total taxes. Of those total taxes, only $746 go to the city of Jacksonville Beach. The other $2,900 goes to other taxing authorities, of which the lion's share is the city of Jacksonville as our county government and the Duval County School Board. Inland Navigation and the Water Management District make up a smaller portion of those taxing authorities. Next. This pie chart shows you a little bit better graphically of how those tax revenues are split up. You can see the two large pieces of the pie are not necessarily ours. And the city of Jacksonville Beach is a total of about 20% of the total taxes paid by the typical homeowner. Next. This next chart is to show you the change in property valuations over the last 15 or so years that we have seen. You can see that in 2008 was a first peak of about $3.2 billion of assessed value. And that is when the economy hit a Great Recession. And you can see that that trough dragged out for a very long period of time. The values dropped through 2012 and 13 before they started to increase again, did not reach their pre-existing limits until about 2017. And this year in 2020, we actually breached the $4 billion of assessed value mark. But this gives you a good example of how that trough went over a number of years. These next two charts are going to show you a comparison of our general fund property taxes in comparison to public safety expenditures. This is a typical exercise that is done by municipal governments so that people can see that the dollars they pay for their property taxes usually have a difficult time paying for all of the public safety that is offered by their community. In this particular instance, the bottom half of each column represents the police department budget, while the top half of the column represents the fire department. You can see that the property taxes in the early 2010s did not even cover all of the police department, and only recently started covering all of police and half of the fire department. Next. This slide shows you that with contracting over the last 2 years, we've actually reduced the expenditures within the fire department, and we're actually coming to a position of having property taxes be very close to covering all of the costs associated with public safety in the city. And that's a pretty good measure of property tax to level of service being provided. Next. When people think of our general funds, they think that it's just property taxes, and it is not. It's actually a myriad of different funds that are collected from all different revenue streams. In our case, our general fund is made up just over 50% from property taxes, but then we do have communication services taxes, licenses, permits, other fees, shared revenues from the state that make up that remaining 47% of our total general fund budget. As you can see, the state shared and other governments for 16%. That's where we start talking about the state share of revenues that we know are going to be impacted by COVID-19. The question is, how deep and for how long? Next. In terms of where those monies are expended, you can see that 42% to the police department and 13% to fire services make up the lion's share, but we do have other services that need to be paid for and can only be paid out of our general fund revenues. So that includes our planning and development services, parks and recreation, a portion of public works, and some of the other services and benefits that we need within the city. Next. This chart is so the council can see the changes to our pension contributions over almost a 10-year window. You can actually see in the 2013-2014 columns, the city implemented pension reform and was able to drive down the financial contributions to the pension system by about $1 million a year. Since that time in 2017 and 18 is when legislative changes were made that affected our rate of return assumptions, and we saw a spike in the contributions that we have to make. For 2021, our pension contributions are going to come in at a little over $3 million for all 3 pensions that the city has. Next. Utilities are something that we are consistently concerned about, because if they're out of your sight, they're out of your mind, and a lot of times people forget that we actually have to inspect, maintain, and schedule for the replacement of such utilities. So the next few screens are going to talk a little bit about those utilities that we have. The first is to show you all the different utility services that we provide, or enterprise funds, which is why the golf course is actually in there as well. You'll see that there's not a lot of substantive change between all the different enterprise funds that are there, with the exception of stormwater showing a 26% reduction. That is due to the annual change in capital projects associated with that particular fund. The capital projects that we have listed are less than previous years, which is why it's showing a reduction in the expenses within stormwater. Next. These are just a list of some of the issues that we always have to watch for with regards to owning and maintaining utility services. Again, it's basically regulatory driven. It is also getting a better handle on our asset management and replacement and maintenance schedules. And the third is technology. Technology is changing on a regular basis and allowing us to maintain and inspect our items in a way that we were never able to do before. Next. The next few slides are just going to walk you through snapshots of the amount of materials and systems that we have associated with each of our utilities, so that people have a better understanding of what we actually have to deal with. With electric, we're literally talking hundreds of miles of underground and overhead cabling systems. We're talking about massive electrical substations, and we're talking about over 35,000 customers that we bill for on a regular basis. Next. Our natural gas system, while it's smaller, is still something substantive for us. It's 307 customers spread out across our Beaches Energy Services system. And we sell over 2 million therms per calendar year, which is a good amount of natural gas. Next. Water and sewer, again, over 11,000 customers, and again, hundreds of miles of water mains, manholes for our sewer system, almost 2,000, 38 pump stations with pumps, motors, and controls that all have to be maintained, and a pollution control plant that processes over 2 million gallons of wastewater a day in order to protect the environment. Roads, sidewalks, and stormwater, again, just under 100 miles of road that we are responsible for taking care of, along with all of the sidewalks, all of our stormwater inlets, ditches, and channels that we are required to maintain. Next. So with regards to utilities, a quick summary, we are trying to be more proactive and develop plans for each of our utilities in order to get a better handle on inspection, maintenance, and replacement schedules across the board. You're aware that a couple years ago, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the city embarked on creating a pavement condition index for our roadway systems. And you'll hear a little bit more about that from Public Works. We're finally at a point where we're starting to apply the data. Beaches Energy Services is right now in the middle of developing a strategic operating plan so that they know where to focus their revenues, their efforts over the next 5+ years to make sure that they are on the right track. We're also planning on, in short order, getting a wastewater assessment under our belts and starting that before the end of the fiscal year to take a look at the condition and locations of all of our pipes, and a water and stormwater assessment will also follow in fiscal year 2021. All of this is being done to create a better structure and better operational plan for each of our utilities departments, so we are better positioned for the long run. Next. And that brings us to the end of the high-level overview before we dive into individual department presentations. Are there any questions from council on some of this higher level information or general information associated with the budget? And if not, Jacob will roll into presentation number 2. And again, for the council's benefit, all of the department directors that are participating today will be remaining on the line. So if at the end of the presentations, you have some questions, we have more than enough time and resources to answer them for you. I'm going to turn it over to Beaches Energy, who has 2 presentations to make today.
So first of all, can everybody hear me? Okay. So I was going to mention the strategic plan, but since Mike already mentioned it, we'll just kind of like go right into the next presentation. You've probably heard me say this before, and I've said this many times over the years, is that we need to entwine the municipal public utility so deeply into the fabric of our community that you can't identify where we end and they begin. And that's how you stop the threat of utilities such as FP&L trying to come in and take away your municipal utility away from you and take away all that revenue that benefits the city. So Matt's here to discuss one such project that we started about a year ago. It's public-private partnership. Will be highly beneficial to the city first, and then ultimately the communities we serve through Beaches Energy. So I'll turn it over to Matt Sealy.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And like Alan said, I'd like to start just by pointing out that in my nearly 20-year career as an electric distribution utility engineer, what I'm about to share with you in these next few slides is a first for me. And that really emphasizes the strengths of being a publicly owned municipal electric utility and the interagency department cooperation that has to come with that. This just wouldn't have happened anywhere else. And that really just points out the benefits of being publicly owned and sharing those resources. And so next, this presentation really is a result of a simple conversation that took place about 2 years ago. And the GIS systems architect and I were driving back from Fort Pierce Utilities, where we were researching an application that we're actually currently in the process of implementing that will greatly improve our efficiencies and the way we do business. And on the way back, we're basically talking about the future of the city and Beaches Energy and just how we're going to continue to modernize and improve and stay the best utility in the nation. And so we're talking about the different things like distribution automation, automated metering infrastructure, smart grid, smart streetlights, smart city, just all those different concepts, mobile device deployment where we're able to get information to the field and back from the field in real time and in better fashion and more accurate fashion. And the problem with all those things I just mentioned, they basically all require their own communication system. And so Donald basically said, you really need to check out not what the police department is going to implement, what they had actually already implemented. So they were ahead of the curve. And so after getting back and talking a little bit with the police department, I quickly realized that not only do they have a highly robust, highly resilient, reliable, adaptable system in place, it's basically the best system you could ever wish for and implement. And so that just, again, attributes the type of employees we have within the city of Jacksonville Beach. And so really quickly, we saw that we could take this and expand upon it. And so I was in the initial phases of designing power to Margaritaville. And I asked a question that I've never asked in my career. I said, do you want fiber with that power? And something I never thought I'd hear myself say or get into, but I was met with an emphatic yes. And the reason is, which I'll share in these next slide here, if you don't mind, next. I learned that the police department next has cameras at the beach, and these cameras talk wirelessly next to radios at the beach. And if you would hit next, you'll see those arrows kind of communicating. They talk to those radios at the beach, and then those radios next talk wirelessly back to a master radio. Okay, so we all kind of aware in the last few years next of the implementation of home Wi-Fi and just kind of the significant expansion next of things like Xfinity Mobile, where they basically are cranking up the in-home Wi-Fi. And what that allows them to do is have a system that piggybacks on things like Verizon and such, but also using that benefit of having a good internet infrastructure where they can wirelessly get on other people's basically home. Well, the problem that you can kind of see there, those radios, they interfere with that signal. And so the transmission quality of those cameras coming back started to degrade. And so when I started asking about Margaritaville, the concept is you have fiber to a radio now out at the beach on one of the tallest structures, and you're bringing that data back at the speed of light, literally. And so in the discussions, what we realized is that can actually use systems that will adapt to this and put things like, we want to actually go ahead next. We want to put pucks, basically these small pucks that'll go in the truck, and they allow the trucks then to communicate on a city wireless system. So it's behind the firewall. It's completely, in-house on the island. It doesn't depend going off island for any sort of communications or anything like that. And so we can actually use this then for everything. So from a Beaches Energy perspective, of course, I'm selfishly looking at it saying, okay, all of my desired future applications and big data, if you will, can actually go on to this highly secure, robust system and behind the firewall, so everything is out there in place. And so we won't have to have other different applications and other vendors and other things that we have to manage. All these different things we'd have to have juggling and paying, different costs to and things like that. It's all in-house. And so working with a consultant in the industry right now, Siemens, that's done this for quite some time. We came up with an initial estimate. So we're looking beyond city of Jacksonville Beach. For Beaches Energy, we'd actually like to expand this fiber. And the fact is we already have a significant amount of SCADA fiber in place for our SCADA system throughout the territory. And so we kind of like to talk about merging these two into one, in-house managed fiber system with these that everybody can benefit from. And so again, the benefits are being a barrier island that as long as we plan this right and we have backup power to these radios, if a hurricane like the one coming or a stronger one basically impacts us, we'll actually still have communications and be able to get information to the field and back from the field in a real-time fashion, not dependent on, off island communications. And so the final bullet point I put on there was basically smart grid, smart city. And that's, again, City of Jacksonville Beach, Public Works, Police Department, just having the ability for citizens to actually be able to leverage this, and also communicate through it, smart parking meters, things like that. There's a lot of other cities that aren't using their in-house communication system. They don't even have that capability, but they're actually, they are using other communication means to do certain things that, citizens are benefiting from. And, we're studying those now and trying to kind of line up where do we think we could actually benefit and what seems to be working and beneficial. And so now that I've kind of geeked out on you, I'll open up to, are there any questions? Because I know I've been learning a lot through this process, and I know it's a lot to take in. Any questions that I may answer for you? I think you can go to the next slide too, Jacob. I think it's a question slide, maybe. Okay. I like your background, Alan. That's nice, by the way.
Yeah, nice presentation.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
so hearing no questions, I mean, there's a myriad of services we can offer through this network. We just haven't got to the point yet where we've started looking at them and testing them. Of course, we'd like to start with the low-hanging fruit, controllable street lights and other things like that. But we really don't know the true cost of all those yet. We're going to look at them, and we're going to adopt it slowly so that you get adoption among your customers first, so that they buy into it before we expand our services related to that. So if there's no other questions, I'll move on to the next presentation. I don't see any hands or anything. So Jameson Parker will be up next. He'll be talking about our first EPC, which is Engineer Procure Construct project at our Sampson substation. The project is to replace transformer number 2, which was our largest transformer at that substation, which was 40 years old. This is the first time we've ever done a project like this. And just keep in mind, as he's talking about this, that the last substation transformer project that we had was at Guana substation, which took about 2 years to complete. Keep in mind, we've only been working on this project, the actual construction side of this project, since June. So we plan to close out the project in August. So you think about 2 years versus 2 to 3 months. It's pretty significant. The EPC methodology has a significant impact on timeline because you have one person running the show and holding people accountable. So I asked Jameson to step in and discuss the Sampson T2 transformer replacement project and methodology.
Technical difficulties here. I don't know what's going on with this camera. Sorry, folks. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Well, we'll go back to the virtual background since this is blurry. All right. Once again, I apologize. All right. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor, Senior Management, and public. My name is Jameson Parker, Beaches Energy Substation Transmission Engineering. Today, I'm going to do a very brief presentation on a project delivery model known as EPC, which Alan just mentioned, that we're currently using on a major project and that we anticipate using on future major and complex projects. So EPC for project delivery. We're doing it now in our Sampson substation expansion project. If you can go back, please. Thank you. We're doing it now in our Sampson substation improvement project. We started the overall process in 2018. We partnered with a consultant to act as our owner's engineer to develop specifications necessary to procure the transformer, which by itself is a $2 million asset. And they also wrote the technical specifications for construction and procurement for somebody else to be determined through an RFQ process to come in and handle the rest of the project for us. So combined is roughly about $5 million total between two FYs. The construction actually didn't start until May, and believe it or not, it will be finished next month. So if you look at it from an execution perspective, we're only impacting the station itself for about a 3-month period. Compared to other projects, the last major project we did that was a similar cost has taken us almost 3 years, and we're still technically not finished yet. Also, as I mentioned a second ago, we do anticipate using this project delivery model on all major projects and complex projects moving forward. Next, please. So EPC, engineer, procure, construct. I won't read the definition verbatim, but the Design Build Institute of America says it's the same, excuse me, same thing as design build. So you could use those two terms interchangeably as opposed to a process that most of you are more familiar with known as design bid build, which is very serial and long in nature. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is EPC? Well, to expand on it, well, by the way, as we go through the presentation, these photos you see are photos of the actual EPC project construction at our Sampson substation. EPC, it can include some of the project or all of the project. As I mentioned previously, we did a kind of a hybrid approach. We bought the transformer on our own paper, and we did partner with an independent consultant to act as our owner's engineer, or OE, as we say in short, to help us, since this was the first time. Moving forward, we probably will not use that. We'll just do it in-house as far as the OE goes. It can include everything from planning, siting, routing, permitting, construction coordination, et cetera. You literally bundle everything together into this package, kind of like your big multimedia companies do, if you will. But for us, it's better. Like really the only other method that we could use is design, bid, build. You're talking separate specifications packages for each step of the project. You're talking separate bids for each step of the project. And typically you cannot go on to the next phase of the project until the previous is closed out. When you do EPC or design build or turnkey, however you want to coin it, a lot of these processes can be done in parallel. You still have to have a project schedule. You still identify the critical path, but the actual execution, as mentioned previously, has been shrunk down to a May to August timeframe. Owner in review or oversight mode. We're not really so much in oversight mode with this particular project. We're more in the review mode. My counterpart with our prime contractor, we talk multiple times daily. I'm in tune to everything that's going on, and it's just more of a courtesy collaboration. They're handling everything for us. I've had numerous conversations where they said something to the effect of, all these little issues came up last week, but I took care of it. Don't worry about it. Normally that would have stopped the project. We would have had to call people in, and it drags things out unnecessarily. And for us being a municipal, having limited staffing resources, it truly is the simplest and best form for this type of project. Next, please. See, I'll try to hit on some of the high notes here. I won't go through all these verbatim. We talked about the first bullet already. Early known cost. So once we went through the RFQ process to identify an EPC prime contractor, they then went out and competitively got pricing for all the necessary subcontractors, the concrete folks, the fence folks, the steel fabricators, the miscellaneous pieces and parts. And in an open book fashion, they shared that with us. They said, we went to these 3 vendors or these 2 vendors, and these were the costs. Really no different than we would have done if we had gone through our own internal procurement processes. Nothing's being hidden. So open book, fewer claims, single point of responsibility. So as mentioned previously, I've got my direct counterpart with the prime contractor. They are the single point. They are the one pulling the strings. They are the one orchestrating every facet of this project. Whereas if we had done this with the design, bid, build methodology, if I had an issue with the concrete guy or the electrician or whatever, I'm having to individually fight those battles, and time is money, literally. You can't do it all. Much more professional relationship. I'm dealing with a high-level qualified P&P professional within the design firm. I'm not having to deal with a superintendent or a foreman or something like that. And in the end, because there is one point of responsibility, there's fewer claims because they're handling all that for us. They build that into their risk portfolio. Next slide, please. So this is a ancillary benefit that we did not realize we were going to get until the first day of construction was complete. This is a really cool tool. It's an app that they pay for. On the far left, you'll see a graphic. We get a snapshot of the temperature, morning, midday, and afternoon. There's a very high level description of who was on site, what they were doing. If you go to the middle, the bottom portion has a survey. Were there any delays? Were there any weather incidents? Oh, yes, there were. So now when I'm going back looking at time cards as a supervisor, and I see that my guys had 10, 15 hours of overtime. Why? Well, right here, weather delay, lightning. It's all centered around safety. And to highlight the safety aspect of it, the far right graphic, at that particular time of day, or on the day this was taken, the heat index was 106. So just every single day we get this email that gives us a very high level of what was done and what the look ahead is. Next, please. Some of these we've already highlighted. I'll run through the important ones once more before I close out my presentation. So typical reasons for using EPC: owner resources are limited. Within Beaches Energy, I am the only substation / transmission engineer. We just brought somebody new on last year. He's more of it in the field doing hands-on type stuff. So from a PM perspective, we've got one person. And when we have multiple projects going on, you now have competing priorities. So for me to be able to pass that responsibility onto somebody else is a huge benefit, not only to Beaches Energy, but to the city and then ultimately the public. Schedule constraints. The other project that we previously did that was of a similar value, we had outages for months on end over the course of 2 to 3 years. Whereas this project, as I mentioned earlier, we started May, we will be done next month. And when this particular substation, Sampson substation on the background here, that's our critical tie to the outside world. We have 2 ties. The one goes to FPL, one to JEA. And then once we go through the transformers in the station, we come back to the beach on 2 lines. That's 2 of the 3 power injection points to the beach. This is our most critical facility. So getting outages here is not as simple as letting it happen. There's a lot of coordination that happens with the state and other utilities surrounding us. As far as another major benefit, lock in key equipment and resources. Once the project is developed and the schedule is put together, all the equipment and materials necessary to complete the project is ordered at the same time. And that procurement process is owned and managed by the prime contractor. We're not having to worry about internal conflicting issues. I would have a next slide, but in the spirit of going virtual, I'm going to have a virtual next slide. If there are any questions, I would like to open the floor for those now.
So you mentioned a lot of the benefits of this. What are the downsides besides, I'm assuming, cost?
If I had to pick one negative, I would say that the speed at which it happens. This has been a very fast-paced project for us. That's a good thing. We're not used to it. We're used to things taking a long time. So to manage my day-to-day responsibilities alongside this project, it's literally lightning fast. And to be honest with you, I cannot believe that next week our new transformer will be here and be installed.
Yeah, so just to add to that, the downside is if you get somebody doing your EPC project that doesn't know how to do EPC like these guys do. You get somebody who comes in and does EPC, EPC is a term what they use, but it's the way that they actually perform the EPC that makes it seamless, that makes it, that keeps you informed of what's going on, that they're on top of every issue. I mean, every time I've brought up an issue that I see on that daily report, they were already on top of it and handled it. It doesn't cost us any extra money to do that. And I think that's the benefit. And I think, the last time EPC was done by a municipal in Florida was over 20 years ago. So this is the first time it's been done by a Florida municipal in 20 years. We saw the benefits of it, but we also had to pick the right people to do the job for us, and we found that. So we're really fortunate.
Thank you, Alan.
Hey, great job.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you go ahead, Georgette.
Why did the others stop using it?
Go ahead, James. For that very reason is,
go ahead.
So for that very reason, what happened was you get people that say they can do EPC, and they frankly can't. And if you're not going to hold them accountable, or then it becomes a huge issue. The other problems that people have had is they go out and bid an EPC project, and then in the middle of the project, they want to get involved. They want to change things. And once you start getting involved yourself and start directing things and start changing things, well, then you're going to have changes. You're going to have cost overruns. You're going to have re-engineering needs to be done. All kinds of things can come up that way. And so, Jameson, if you have anything else to add, I'm sure you do.
I was just going to mention that we don't really have a lot of information as to why it was not done. Just that I hate to have a canned response, but we did hear a lot of, well, we've always done things this way and it works. So we wanted to, we saw the benefits of EPC. We saw some presentations that spoke to the concept of it. And based on recent other projects that we had done with the serial design bid build process and how long that had taken, we didn't see any reason that we could lose. And to echo what Alan said, we had to make sure that when we did the RFQ process to identify a prime contractor, that those specs were written rock solid. So hats off to our owner's engineer that developed that for us, because that allowed us to thoroughly vet the proper person for this particular project.
So I'm hearing that the reason why it stopped being used in the past was poor oversight and poor management. So
You
what
get someone else to say that.
systems do we have in place to ensure that that doesn't happen to us, as we will eventually have turnover in the agency?
I would say the biggest thing is documentation and turnover. As we do these projects, at the end of any project, you should sit down and have an after action report or a lessons learned and compile your information and store it. And on the flip side, when you go into a new project, go back and take those lessons learned out. Hey, last time we did this, this is what we thought we were going to do. These are the things that happened. This is what we learned from it. Let's take those and build on it. So there has to be really good communication internally within the departments and the divisions, and we've got to have really good turnover from project to project and as people transition from people to people.
And we currently do that.
We are now, absolutely.
Okay, and so it's documented and it goes through and it's reviewed every time.
We are doing that process now. I've got a massive project folder. It's very organized. When we go to do our next EPC, I'm going to go back to my EPC playbook and we're going to go from there.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody
other
else have any
questions?
questions?
It's a good presentation, Jameson. You guys are doing a great job. Appreciate the hard work and effort you put into it.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alan and Beaches Energy. And with that, we're going to switch over to Recreation and Parks. And Jason Fatides and Trevor Hughes, they have a presentation that they would like to give.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Excellent. The Urban Trails Project is something that the Parks and Rec Department's really been thinking about and kind of dreaming about for some time. And really this past year with the city's public outreach and through the Parks and Rec assessment, we've really come where the public really desires us to create an urban trails, a way of connecting. You can go to the next slide, Jacob. A way of connecting all of our parks together, our beaches and shopping, and really be able to give people a safe environment, a safe routing to go park to park, neighborhood to neighborhood. And it's kind of hard to ride around the neighborhood and the community and not dream big, not look at it and see what potential we could have. It's been something that we've really been thinking about a lot, and the community's really confirmed it. So we're excited about that. Next slide. So our definition for an urban trail would be a citywide network of non-motorized multi-use pathways that are used by bicyclists, walkers, joggers for both transportation and recreational purpose. Next slide. So this here would be just a typical one. Obviously, we haven't done any planning. We haven't gone, but our goal would be to have a path that's large enough for possibly two-way traffic, to have a buffer between the roadway and the trail. But ultimately, being in an established community, the width of our trail will really be site specific on what areas they ultimately end up going down. Some areas may only be 6 feet wide. Some areas may be as wide as 10. But typically, we would like to have a good buffer for safety and to keep them separated, from the citizens. Next slide. So here are some typical trails. You can see the trees. This gives us an excellent opportunity to go back to the city of Jacksonville and take use of the tree fund and be able to use those create shaded paths. Next slide, please. Goals. So our goals would be to create a network that's easy to access with no point further than 5 minute by bike or 10 minute by walk. Really have a trail system that's integrated enough within our city that everybody could access, that everybody can enjoy it. Make trails wide enough to accommodate both recreation and non-motorized transportation. So that'll be, again, site by site. Next slide. And incorporate trail amenities, features such as rest areas, wayfinding signs, lighting, shade, landscaping, maybe some exercise equipment. Next slide. And also to give us an opportunity to really promote our memorial bench program, our memorial tree program. We'll be integrate other things that the city currently has that aren't being utilized. I envision lots of benches and maybe people donated them, putting plaques, you know, really helping our memorial program that we have. Next slide. Again, this just shows benches, it shows lighting, it shows some of the areas that we could incorporate through some of the natural settings that we do have around the city. Next slide. So this would be really just conceptual. You know, the first year we'd like to come in, we've requested $75,000 for design. We would ask for public's input, for the council's input to really focus where our priorities lay, where we would like to start. We have kind of drawn a basic map of what we feel would be really cool to come around the city, but ultimately we want the city's input. We want your input and to help us prioritize areas. So this first year we would ask for the money design fees, and then the following years we ultimately think that a path around the city would be about 6 miles. So we just put, you know, these are estimates based on a 10-foot cement path. And ultimately it might be that you guys tell us, hey, we want 2 miles this year or 1 mile this year. So all that's really just conceptual at this point. But ultimately we'll rely on you guys to help point us in a direction and priorities. And we're just excited for the potential of this project and what it would bring, the benefits it would bring to our city, the benefits of allowing people to be able to move in and out of our city, to use all of our parks and recreation facilities in a safe manner. And we're just excited to get started on it. That's all I have. Any questions? All right, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Well, just to go over the next steps, we foresee that, you know, a while back, council did ask us to look into a parks assessment. And we're happy to announce that, you know, we have that completed. We're excited to bring that to you maybe at a coming briefing. We think that this project is closely associated with that assessment. And so at that time, we look for your input and direction. We're looking forward to the project. And we're open for questions if you have any.
I have a question, guys.
Okay.
I love the trail, the urban trail, I guess, is that what you're calling it? And so I guess my question is, so one of the things that I've been working on with the city of Jacksonville is improvements for Penman Road. Would this apply? I mean, would part of the trail, would it be part of that, or is our trail going to be separate from that? Would that be a city of Jacksonville thing, at least the multi-use path that's along Penman Road? And then what we're doing would be something separate, but would be tied to it maybe?
No, absolutely. I had that in my notes and I left it off. That's one of the areas we'd really like to take advantage of when some of these streets are upgraded or when there's a repaving that's going to come up, that we make sure that we work closely with planning and public works and come in and make these part of the design. Like we would tie into the trail at Penman and able to come back and forth. And if public works was planning on paving streets that wasn't an area that we deemed would have a trail, we would incorporate it all in at those times. But yes, exactly. We'd like to capture and use the upgrading of those streets. Yes.
And what is your thought about how we would go about identifying where the trails would be and that sort of thing?
So my thought is we'd get the city involvement, city planning, or allow people to give input. We'd take input from the council and we'd bring a planner in and we'd look at the streets that, some streets would be nice to have a trail down, but they're kind of already established and it just doesn't make sense to send a road down there. So some of them will be, they need to go down some of the drainage easements that we have, or some of the areas that our ultimate goal would be to allow the most people to be able to use them, but negatively impact the least amount of people. So we just really got to get out here and walk our streets and locate and find the areas where they fit the best. I mean, we have some ideas now. You know, for instance, just one that I would love to see. You know, we have this huge parking lot at the golf course in Wingate Park. Well, we could easily make a path that comes around the driving range, and behind number 1 green, there's already a gate in the fence that ties right into 5th, which comes right by Carver Center, which goes right into Oceanfront Park. There's areas like that could greatly connect. You know, 10th Avenue runs right into the drainage ditch that goes out 12th Avenue. We could easily come in and tie one that comes there. So I think what we'll look at them, and then, you know, my idea is the ones that we could make the most impact, the easiest at first, you know, you get those done, and then we come back and start tying them all in. But that'll be all part of the planning process.
I mean, do we envision having like a master plan of all of everything that we want to do, and then just work on it in pieces as we,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yes, the design, we would love to have an entire master plan, the entire area, and then we'll come together and prioritize which areas need to come together first.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't want to do it like piecemeal, and, you know,
Right.
I'd like to make sure that we have like a master plan and then we implement it.
Yes, that's what
In
we'd like
phases,
to have
maybe.
this year. And the design phase would be to have the entire master plan, all the trails on paper completely laid out to present.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with that. There's a lot of places in this community where the sidewalk literally just stops. So I'd love to avoid that. I had the same question as Sandy about the incorporating into the Penman Road project. So thank you for that answer. And then as you kind of conceptualize this in your brain, and the route that you just said sounds like it would be an awesome start. Do you foresee that this would all be on property that we already own, or would there need to be any acquisition involved? You know, just from a
I think that'll be all part of the planning process. I mean, obviously we'll get with Bill and planning and Public Works, and, you know, where we can. I believe we own a large amount on 10th. You know, 10th comes down, then you come down the ditch on 12th. That would be huge. Use some of these areas where easements are larger, but that will be all part of the planning process.
Thank you. I love it. This sounds great. Looking forward to seeing this one come to fruition.
It's safe to say that Trevor and Jason have already done a lot of background detail work on this, but I throttled them back with what they would actually show today until we had an opportunity to bring a briefing in just the next couple of months to talk about it in conjunction with the parks assessment. But a lot of what you're thinking about concept today, they've been thinking about for the past 3 or 4 months. When we got to about the 4th or 5th community conversation, and they realized this was a topic that was being brought up meeting after meeting after meeting. So it is high on our radar. It's something that we understand is a desire of the community, and we are making plans to move in the direction of a master plan. And then some of those segments of the master plan will be done proactively, and other portions will be done as we do road construction work or utilities work in those particular areas.
I have one other question. I know that Neptune Beach is currently working on strategic planning as well, and this is a big issue for them also. They want to do more walkability, bikeability throughout their community. So I would just like to recommend that we spend some time talking to them too, because I think connectivity to whatever they're doing is going to be a really good thing, because I know my husband and I, we don't just, you know, stay in Jack's Beach, and it would be great to be able to have connectivity to our sister beach cities as well.
Especially around Fletcher, using that as a method to get kids on bikes and get into school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions for Rec and Parks? If not, Trevor and Jason, thank you both. Great presentation. And Jacob, we're ready to move on to CRA. And CRA and Public Works will be the next two that kind of round out the showcase for this year. But the CRA will go first with Bill Mann.
And can everybody hear me? Okay, for whatever reason, I can't, my video is not activated, but for those who don't know, my name is Bill Mann. I'm the planning and Development Director for the city, and I also serve as the Community Redevelopment Agency Administrator. And then a prior presentation, oh, there you go, I can start my video. I think. I'm gonna keep talking anyway. Anyway, I've got several slides to go through with y'all, and the first one deals with the agency as a whole, and then the subsequent slides will talk a little bit about the downtown district and a little bit about the South End district. In terms of the CRA as a whole, the biggest activity going on for the next year will be the work that we have hired Gilmore Hagan Partners, a government consulting firm, to help us create and refine a redevelopment program manager job position to assist the agency and myself in the administration of the agency. And to that extent, in next year's budget, we have included money in the operating budget for a salary for that position. And then I can't remember the exact pay grade number, but the salary range, I believe, is $50,000 to $82,000. So it's a mid-level professional that would be 40 hours a week working on the implementation of the various plans, programs, and projects of the CRA. Gilmore Hagan Partners is also going to create an initial work program for that position, including communication strategies. They will be provided with an incentives toolbox for economic development, and also instruction and guidance on capital project development and programming. And also, coincidentally, Gilmore Hagan Partners is currently working with us to develop a 2-hour training session for the CRA that we're going to aim for the middle of August to just put them through some statutory training and let them know just a little more, give them a little more formal guidance on their operation. So that's the overall, but let's go to the CRA priorities downtown. I'll tell you the non-infrastructure portions of our priorities, and the public works presentation will touch on the infrastructure, the major infrastructure that I think everybody knows is going on between Beach and 13th. But in terms of non-infrastructure, next year will be continued implementation of the Dix Heights Partners lighting plans, art master plan, bike parking plan, wayfinding signage plan, and street furnishings master plans. Currently, the lighting plan is in review by Beach's Energy Service to determine if it can be implemented in-house. If not, it would go out to bid and we'll have a private contractor do that. We anticipate that project to begin in fiscal year 21. The bike parking and bike parking and street furnishing plans, we're going to try to combine and get one contractor to do both of those type of work, because it's installation of materials. We think we can probably package them together and we may be able to get it done a little more efficiently. And right now we intend to let that out to bid this year before the end of this fiscal year, and we'd like to implement it next year. So that would be in next year's budget. The art master plan is one thing that we're going to reach out for additional consultant help in the actual assistance. There are art consultants that do work for cities throughout the state, throughout the country, that are specifically geared towards letting out call to artists. And the art side of it is just something I don't have personal familiarity with it. So we will be looking for outside assistance to help implement that plan next year. I will tell you, it's topical. We were recently talking about the relocation of the Veterans Memorial. That happens to be a prime gateway location that Dix Heights has identified as a nice place for a piece of focal art. I would imagine it'd be some type of sculpture. So that's, if people are wondering, well, what's going to go where the memorial used to be? That's referenced in their art plan. The new pier entryway plan is the design and construction documentation are currently underway. That work will be done possibly by the end of this year, if not early in next year. But remember, this is the pier entryway itself. This is the approach from First Street up to the pier. And we talked about it when Dix Heights gave the presentation about the concepts. But that cannot physically take place until the pier reconstruction project is done. The pier reconstruction project was just okay to get going again. So they're actually physically now out over the water with their construction trestle. We still estimate probably 15 to 20 months construction. So upon the completion of that project and upon the completion of Spring Hill Suites next door, because they co-use part of that entryway area, then we would actually implement the construction of that. So it'll be 2022, I imagine, before the pier entryway project actually gets the construction starts. Okay, let's move to South Beach. The South Beach, we've got the final phases 3, 4, and 5 of the South Beach Parkway roadway and stormwater improvements project. That was a very large scale project recommended in 2011 by one of our engineering consultants that basically did a holistic look at all the infrastructure in the south end and made recommendations for improvement. That plan was actually amended into the South End Redevelopment District. So, and the big credo with development plans is if it's in the plan, you can spend money on it. If it's not in the plan, you can't spend money on it. So that is formally in the plan. Just to let you know about the 3 remaining phases. Phase 3 is a reconstruction of the small open pond. Some people may not even know it's out there. It's basically between Longhorn Steakhouse and Turner Ace Hardware in the south end. It's a separate pond before you get to the large stilling basin behind Pier 1. That is due for reconstruction. We had thought we were going to implement the construction of that I believe in the last couple of years, but it was the same with the stormwater channel project in the south end. The initial estimated quality of construction was going to be sheet pile construction, and the costing for that was through the roof. So we've come back in and Public Works has looked at a different concept. I think most people are familiar with the modular stack block retaining wall type systems. It's not literally the residential kind you could get at Home Depot, but there is that type of system that we would actually be able to replace the walls, the existing walls of the pond with that instead of the expensive sheet piles. And that would also minimize the need for construction easements we'd have to get around the pond. The phase 4 of the infrastructure project are the roadway and drainage improvements to the Jacksonville Drive neighborhoods between America Avenue and South Beach Parkway. This project includes the multi-purpose path that recently was discussed with council in the CRA. And the design and construction of that project are roughly $1.6 million, and that's all scheduled for 2021 as well. Phase 5 of that project are various small roadway improvement projects, slightly drainage, including certain drainage improvements for Marsh Landing Boulevard, which is the frontage road on the south side of Butler Boulevard. To the extent that it is within the redevelopment district, the CRA is allowed to maintain that road. 34th Avenue South, it's the little piece of 34th Avenue South back behind Palms Church. I don't know if y'all are familiar where the mayor used to live. The former mayor lived at the end of 34th Avenue South. So there's a little reconstruction right there. Isabella Boulevard, which is just south of Bonefish Grill, the Isabella Professional Office Park, portions of that are scheduled to be improved. And the stormwater improvements include the South Basin Channel. The basin that I just referred to is the large stilling basin behind Pier 1, and it hasn't been desilted since it was constructed. So we're going to look into the design for that, and also the design for modifications and maintenance to the discharge pond that leaves that stilling basin and wanders along the north side of the Greensway out to eventual discharge at the Intercoastal Waterway. Again, that channel has never been maintained, so we just want to make sure that we've got a good discharge system for the entire, it drains basically the entire south third of the city. So we're pretty keen on keeping that maintained. And also the general priorities for the South Beach outside of infrastructure, in reaction to the major infrastructure projects in the South End nearing completion, TIF expenditures going forward will be directed to, number 1, the South Beach infrastructure improvements, South Beach Park infrastructure improvements and maintenance program that Jason just alluded to, and as is provided in the 27 plan amendment to the South End, which specifically states and allows that we can use TIF monies to maintain TIF funded improvements, which is basically everything in South Beach Park. Sunshine Park wooden structures will need replacement at some point in the not too distant future. And as was discussed when we all approved, or when you and the CRA approved the installation of that AstroTurf field, that's not an unlimited lifespan. In 10 years or so, that will need replacement. So that's the type of thing that we can look for going forward for TIF expenditures. In addition to that, and this ties in with the discussion that Jason just had about the multi-purpose trails, there's the opportunity, and we do have the public right-of-way within the South End District to extend, number 1, the section of multi-purpose path that we talked about on the Jacksonville Drive project. We anticipate extending that all the way down to the east edge of the CRA, which is at 3rd Street. So we'd have a multi-purpose path going on Jacksonville Drive all the way to 3rd Street. And that's within the CRA, so that would be able to be funded by TIF. The same opportunity also going from the corner of Jacksonville Drive and South Beach Parkway north on the west side of South Beach Parkway, there's the opportunity for a multi-purpose trail, not only to connect to South Beach Park, but also to connect to Osceola Avenue. And then you simply turn the corner right at Osceola Avenue, and the opportunity exists within the CRA to run down along the north side of the Ocean Cay subdivision. And that would be the CRA's input into this overall citywide parks trail. then this is just what the CRA can contribute because it's within the boundaries of the CRA. And other than that, the next presentation from Public Works will touch on our infrastructure projects. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And all right, well then I will turn it over to Mike in Public Works.
Thank you for that presentation, Bill. Next up will be Dennis Barron for the Public Works Department. And as Bill said, some of the projects that he's going to talk about are capital in nature and related to the CRAs, as well as some other projects within their proposed budget. All yours, Dennis.
Good afternoon. I get to be the final presentation for the day. I only got an hour and 15 minutes, so I think we'll have plenty of time. Next slide, please. I'm going to take off from where Director Bill Mann left us moving forward in the CRA. These are the CRA projects that fall under Public Works control. Next slide. First series of slides here is going to be an update of our current Project 2, which runs from 11th Avenue South to 13th Avenue South. This is a project overview. Everybody's been involved in seeing this going on. So this kind of gives you the general map of the area that's involved in that, including the construction and contractor laydown area, running everything from 11th Avenue South down to just slightly south of 13th Avenue South, pretty much from the beach all the way to 4th Street South. Next slide. So this part of the project shows the storm drainage that was involved in that exact area that we were talking about. And we are currently complete with all of the storm drainage as part of that project. And you can see in the inset photo, that shows the new fencing and inlet structures at the basin at 12th Avenue South and 4th Street South, which was part of the contractor laydown area. So that was some improvements we were able to make after the contractor had begun clearing out that part of that area. Next slide. Of course, as this project goes, it was involved all aspects of Public Works. So this involves all of the potable water upgrades that were made in that area, and everything for potable water is showing complete as well. Next slide. Sanitary sewer. See, we have one little alleyway left there that's in solid green that has not been completed as of the dates of these slides, which was about 2 weeks ago. This project is still on track to be finished at the end of September. So what's left on these slides that's showing undone will be getting completed here very shortly. Next slide. Final slide involved in this particular project shows the paving that has been completed up to this point. Everything with the little red highlighted lines in yellow is all completed at this point in time. Everything that's in the yellow is yet to be completed. The little inset map on the right-hand side of the slide shows the actual contractor's chart for what is remaining to be paved. And what they have showing there is the pink area on that map is due to be paved next week. And the blue area is due to be paved around September 23rd. Of course, that is all weather permitting. The storm coming in could very much change that timeline very easily. But it shows that they're still on task to be completed by the end of September with that project. Next slide. As you remember, this was part of a larger scale project involving 6 separate projects. Project 1, which was from Beach Boulevard to 4th Avenue South, was completed prior to me coming in. 11th Avenue South to 13th Avenue South was Project 2. That's the task we were just talking about that will be completed hopefully right around September. The punch list will probably carry us a little bit into October, but I would imagine that project will be closed out in October. You see the remaining projects as well. Projects 3, which is following the drainage ditch on out. Projects 4 and 5, which fall under the CRA. And then you see Project 6 falling in there between 13th Avenue South and 16th Avenue South, which is a city-funded project as part of this larger project that falls outside of the CRA. Next slide. This is just a duplication of the previous slide showing the next projects, which is projects 3, 4, 5, and 6. Projects 3, 4, 5, and 6 are currently headed to procurement right now to be out for an RFP within the next 2 weeks and go through our process. We hope to have those secured right before, for the design, right before the next fiscal year starts. So we're still on track to get the project design underway, beginning in the October timeframe of 21, but still yet in this year's budget. Next slide. Another group of projects going on, which is the South End CRA, involve the drainage ditch down in front of Target area. See the top right-hand picture kind of shows what it looked like beforehand as just an open drainage ditch. And the inset picture in the oval shows the double box culvert that was being installed by a contractor. That project actually, by going to a double box culvert poured in place compared to prefabricated pipe, saved a little over $1.5 million as part of an ongoing project. You also see that the top left-hand corner, you have the Ocean Terrace roadway project is sitting at 90% complete as well. So that's another one that's coming in on the cusp of finishing this project. And you can see in the bottom in the blue, you see the future projects, which are the projects Mr. Mann was talking about earlier, involving that south drain channel improvements and that retention pond. Next slide. Final 2 slides involving the CRA, of course, was the completion of the new ADA dune walkovers. This shows all 3 of those walkovers from an aerial view as they were completed. This allowed Public Works to kind of put a new set of specs in place as to what to expect, kind of set the new standard for what we're going to be constructing moving forward. Next slide. Which brings us to our budgeted piece for dune walkovers. We have over $1 million budgeted over the next 5 years, which is $200,000 a year for continuing dune construction, or dune walkover construction. A couple of things we've got to be concerned with, of course, is the sea turtle season, which wipes out half of our construction season, as well as accommodating access for people. We obviously can't take a whole bunch of them in a row out at the same time, or people won't be able to get to the beach. So we got to strategically plan how we're going to do these and which ones we're going to take out at what time to allow people to still have access. And of course, sea level rise and the dune height of these access all comes into play. As you can see from these pictures, these are actual pictures of our walkovers that we have right now, several of them being overtaken due to the fact that they're not tall enough to go over the dunes as they're done. As well as part of that project, there's $800,000 budgeted from fiscal year 22 to 25, $200,000 a year to go for beach outfall projects that are involved in construction with alongside of these same walkovers. Next slide. This brings us to the Public Works part of the actual budget showcase. Next slide. Our primary concerns right now are going to be dealing with several master plans that are going on. We have a pavement master plan that we are just beginning to get back the data on, which help us to assess and monitor pavement conditions, to put together an actual system of which way to go and how to do preventative maintenance, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and to allow us to plan ahead to find out when and where utility work's going on and drainage work's going on, and trying to coordinate all that together into one plan to actually move ahead in being able to put together a real pavement process. Next slide. So this is a representative slide of what our city roadway looks like. Basically, the 3 colors are pretty easy to understand. The green is a preventative maintenance needs. That's your seal coating, micro surfacing type of product. Rehabilitation, which is a little bit heavier involved, pavement reconstruction without actually getting into complete reconstruction. And then the red roads get into complete reconstruction. On our current condition shown in the pie graph at the top right-hand side shows that approximately 52% of our roads fall under the preventative maintenance process. 36 are in the yellow zone, 12 fall under the red. Now, part of our 12% that's in red includes dust control roads that actually don't have an adequate base to be able to, they really need to be reconstructed before we just put money towards them to improve them. We can improve them, but we'll never improve them to 100% without being able to replace that base as part of these projects. So this kind of shows that our plan is currently showing us at a current pavement index of 72.5. That's on a 0 to 100, assuming 100 is a brand new road and 0 is a road that is no longer usable. Next slide. So utilizing this is our rough plan for the coming year in purple, except for the frontage road down on the far left-hand side of the screen. We actually have an RFP going out within the next few days to get what's done in the purple done under the fiscal year 20 budget process. This is also looking at the teal color blue for the fiscal year 21. Now, this is our current pavement plan. So our process, what we have is while we're trying to introduce this master plan and this pavement control index, we're trying to utilize that on top of our existing knowledge with street department knowledge as to which direction we need to go, which roads need it the worst, and then how to kind of do those in a fashion that makes sense. So over the next few years, we're going to be combining both of these systems together to try to maximize what dollars we're spending, how we're doing it, and plan as well to assure that roads are covered in a systematic approach. While we may be avoiding a road that is in the low red zone area, we may be doing so knowing that we've got a major project coming within the next few years that's going to completely reconstruct that road. So the idea that all of our roads are going to be great and wonderful 100% may not necessarily happen until we can get through several years of this process, and then we can actually talk about plans that we already know that are out there in our comprehensive plan to be able to move ahead. So obviously, we're not going to spend money trying to mill and overlay a road that in 2 years we're going to go tear up because we need to completely replace all of the infrastructure underneath it, including the stormwater plants. Next slide. This leads us to fiscal year 20 to completion. We are working towards having our sewer master plan underway. With what that's going to actually get us is the roadmap to what we need to replace and how we need to do it, what kind of projects we need to undertake as far as the sewer side of our process to help prevent the infiltration and inflow, as well as to take into consideration the PCP plant that went through a major overhaul in 2011. All those things kind of help put together with the roadmap of what needs to be fixed where and how that needs to go. And we will have that under contract yet within the next couple of weeks to get that project and that master plan moving ahead. Next slide. Which brings us to fiscal year 21. Of course, right on the cusp of working on a sewer master plan, we've got in the plans this year to begin a water master plan for potable water as well as a stormwater master plan. So our current water system master plan was completed in 1990. That makes it in excess of 30 years old. Our stormwater plan was updated last in 2003, but it was based off of a plan in 1998. So that plan as well is still 20 years old. So we need to move ahead with new master plans to be able to provide us the road work that provides us a good evaluation of what our system is, where our needs are, and where we need to be spending our money for the best bang for our buck to be able to assure that we put a comprehensive plan in place to make those improvements across that infrastructure. These master plans help support our asset management. They give us actually inventory and condition analysis, provides us with a maintenance plan to be able to tell us where we might need to clean, where we might need to replace, where we might need to line piping, what water mains might need to be replaced for the best usage of our dollars as we move forward. This kind of helps put all of the planning in place to be able to move ahead as a unified utility infrastructure replacement process. Next slide. So as part of this, of course, we've also put together a annual water line replacement program. This current next year has $400,000 worth of construction to be done on various water mains throughout the city. Most of that is involved in replacing 2-inch mains to increasing to a larger size, as well as $60,000 to actually design the future water main for FY22, so that we actually are designing in 1 year what we're building in the next year. And the main course priority there is, keep in mind, that's not a Jack's Beach photo, but that is a representative photo of what a 2-inch water line will look like after buildup over years. And your issue is your internal corrosion, reduced flow, and obviously in a 2-inch water main, you don't have fire protection for those parts of town. So this will help us to increase those standards across that section of town for what we're doing for this year. Next slide. A couple of PCP CIP projects are involving a couple more lift stations. Obviously, lift station number 8, which is coming in line with lift station number 7 that's currently underway right now. And so that's a $650,000 investment into lift station number 8. And then again, lift station number 33, which will be the design part of it. So we're back to the same kind of a scenario where we're designing them in 1 year and constructing them in the next year to be able to move ahead, just like we're doing right now. We're trying to work on an idea that kind of puts these into where we can make less impact to the city. We don't want these to stick out like sore thumb. We want them to blend into the neighborhoods to where people don't look at it and think it's an eyesore when we're done what we're doing. Next slide. As part of a project that was just completed with project number 1, the Beach Boulevard Stormwater Station, what was discovered is we have sand buildup in the bottom of that stormwater station. The depth is estimated at 2 foot deep, but it's a large enough station that 2 foot deep times the entire area is the equivalent of 1,280 cubic yards, or 80 tandem dump trucks, if you're thinking about that in a quantity. The other thing to remember is that's 250,000 gallons of water that's being displaced by sand in its place. So that's a big project that's going to be coming in to be able to come in and actually clean that out. Next slide. This kind of shows the representative of where that Beach Boulevard Stormwater Station is and how big it is. Of course, it's between 2nd and 1st Street. Right under Beach Boulevard, right through there. So this green, which is roughly the size of a football field, is how big that stormwater station is under the pavement. You can see on the left-hand inset where you've got the columns and things that you saw on the slide before. That's just a representative photo. So that entire station has approximately 2 foot of silt in the bottom of it that we've got to pump out, dewater, and dispose of, which will actually make a better scenario for if and when we need additional stormwater in that area. Next slide should be final slide. That brings to the end of my part of the budget showcase. So I'll entertain any questions if there are any.
Dennis, my only question is the walkovers on the beach and the ADA walkovers on the beach have had a tendency in the past to get sand blown up there and block them off. Is there any type of PMS that we're doing or inspections to send guys through and make sure those are clear?
To be honest with you, there is not. That, as Mr. Stefopoulos has pointed out, would be a value-added service that would have to be something we would have to figure out how to budget for. We don't have within the bandwidth of Public Works to keep those clear. The new design of those would actually put them at 3 foot above the dune height, which would help keep that from happening. I think there was a lot of political reasons for the heights they were built over the years and where they were at. And so unfortunately, some of those have been just constructed improperly that are just, we're destined to have exactly happen what it is. So unfortunately, we don't have anything in place to be able to attack them other than replace them at the height they need to be to allow them not to be taken over by the dunes going forward.
Thank you.
Mayor, the issue with those crossovers is actually at 2 locations on the crossovers. The first that you have is always at the bottom of the ramp or the stairs where you transition from the walkway into the sand. The second on some of the older walkovers is at the peak where it crosses over the dunes. And the dune is healthy enough that the side banks are actually above the height of the walkway and start to encroach into the walkway. In speaking with Mr. Barron about it, part of the issue we have is that there's consistently wind at the beach, and it consistently changes from the north to the east to the south on a daily basis, and sometimes it changes during the course of the day. So it would literally take a couple, I think we figured out it would be a couple person crew that would have to go out there on a recurring basis that would never stop at one walkover and work their way to one end of the beach over the course of about a week to 2 weeks, and then go back and start over again. And in that time, any sand that gets blown on just has to wait until they get back to it. It's based on the number of walkovers that we have. Our hope is that we can make some design modifications going forward. Obviously, the height crossing over the peak of the dune, if we elevate that by a few feet, that should help with point A, which is the crest of the dunes encroaching into the walkover. The second is to come up with some alternatives at the bottom of staircases and ramps, the ramps in particular, where we're looking at a couple of different options to beta test with some of the next ones that we do. One is looking at doing a floating mat system, similar to what we do for the handicap mats, that could be used as a transition between the walkway and the sand surface. And then as it gets covered over, you're literally just readjusting it to tie in with the new height of the sand. But what we find is, based on storm surge activity and wind activity, you can find the bottom of those ramps are either buried by a foot or two, or potentially after a storm or a northeaster, you actually have a gap where there's a drop down to the sand as well. So that is high on our radar. We're looking at some alternative design options, and hopefully we can beta test a couple with the ones we do this year. Any other questions for any of the department directors that we have on the line for the showcase presentation today? Hearing none, I'd like to wrap up by reminding the council that next week we actually start with our virtual budget workshops. That includes the first one being on Monday. So on Monday, we will actually have 3 virtual meetings back to back. We will have the first budget workshop from 4 to 6 p.m. We're going to try to break about 5:45 so that we can go into the council briefing starting at 6 o'clock. And again, we'll finish up with the briefing probably at 6:45 or 6:50 before going into the 7 o'clock council meeting. I did also want to advise council, you probably saw in an email that was sent out by City Attorney Ambrosio, the governor did do an extension of virtual meetings for a 30-day window. Some of the information that our city attorney picked up is that this was a touchy subject for the governor. Obviously, teachers are reporting back to school next month, and that's the reason that this was only done with a 30-day extension as opposed to a 60-day extension. I think it's safe to assume that there will likely not be an extension of the CMT executive order going past the month of August. So once September rolls around, council needs to think about how we want to start meeting in public again. I've gone ahead and blocked off some time on the August 17th council briefing for council to have the discussion on the logistics of holding those in-person meetings. So you will have an opportunity to talk about it 2 weeks in advance of what we can assume would be our first meeting back in public. With that being said, any final questions?
There is no police department presentation.
That's correct. They do not have any substantive changes to their budget for this upcoming year.
Okay,
They will give a brief presentation at their budget workshop with regards to CALIA standards and accreditation.
great, thank you.
Nicely done, Mike. I mean, this was our first virtual road trip, and we went from riding a bus to sitting in the council chambers to now sitting at the house and looking at the computer. And I think you guys did a great job, and hopefully everybody will adapt readily as we go into the next budget meeting. So thank you.
Thank you all, and we have a good weekend. We are keeping an eye on the tropics. We are taking all of the precautions necessary as well. It looks at this point, it will just be a minor impact to our community based on current tracking projections. So we'll look forward to seeing everybody on Monday afternoon and Monday evening at our next 3 meetings. Have a good
Mike,
night.
one point.
Oh, go ahead.
Mike. Can you hear me? Sorry.
City Attorney Ambrosio?
Yeah, I'm going to distribute to the council and directors a governor's executive order that speaks to the hurricane and that declares a state of emergency in many Florida counties, including Duval. I'm going to email that right now.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you all on Monday. Thanks for attending the 2020 Budget Showcase.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.